cultural patterns are different in different areas. They can differ from one another to a great extent or to a small extent. When it is inside the country, from one place to another, or from one village to another, or one city to another, it may have different cultural pattern, and the difference could be at a smaller range. Whereas when it becomes the question of looking at the cultural patterns in different countries, then probably the extent is much larger. For example, I will give here the reference from Rudyard Kipling, the famous poet. He says in his Ballad of East and West, "East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet." So this very clearly shows that if the cultural patterns are different, then do not expect that the cultures are going to merge together. And in this, he is giving the example of different countries, of totally different cultures. So that means that when the difference in the patterns of the culture is too great, then we should be able to accept it, but we should also be able to understand and accept the fact that we should not try to merge the two patterns together. If the difference in the cultural patterns is at a lesser extent, then we may find that these two cultures can be merged together. But it would not be wise to expect that if the cultural patterns are different from one another to a great extent, such as the example is of the East and the West. In that case, the cultural patterns would be too wide and different from one another. And therefore, as the poet says, they shall never twain, they shall never meet together. They should never have an expectation to be just one. There is no assimilation in that case. But probably the cultural patterns in which we find an example of some communities living next to each other, in that case, maybe those cultural patterns can meet together. Why did he say this? He said this because both have totally different cultural patterns. As I gave the example of the birth of a daughter in the East, there would be many places in the East where same common cultural pattern would exist, that the birth of a girl would be considered to be a burden. And that could develop as a culture complex in many of the communities in the East. Whereas in the West, it would never exist as a cultural pattern because it would not be the responsibility of the parents to get their daughter married and to give a lot of dowry with it in order to get the daughter established. They are two different things. In the East, it is considered that marriage is a responsibility on parents, and the dowry has to be a part of the marriage in order to establish the daughter. Whereas in the West, nothing is considered to be the same. It can be the responsibility of the parents in some Western cultures, but then it would not be dominated by the fact that there has to be dowry accompanied by the girl in order to get herself established in her marriage life. Therefore, the dominant characteristic won't be there, which is actually present in the East. So the concept is totally different, and therefore the patterns are totally different. and they cannot meet together. Therefore, it is better to accept the difference as it is.